Wyoming Territory, 1886. The wind kicked dust across the main road of Red Hollow as the noon sun beat down on wood-planked store fronts and the cracked leather saddles outside the saloon. Inside the general store, the air was heavy with flour dust and quiet judgment. Vera Finnley kept her head low as she placed a jar of preserves on the counter. The left side of her face, from brow to jaw, was marred by a long, pale scar, jagged and deep, the result of a cabin fire that nearly took her life 5 years ago. She was 23 now, unmarried and alone. The town whispered they always had. "That all, Miss Finnley?" the store clerk asked, eyes not meeting hers. She nodded. Outside, laughter echoed from the saloon. A group of ranch hands leaned against the hitching rail, watching her step out with her basket. One of them elbowed the other and said just loud enough, "Shame about the face. Used to be a looker, I heard." Vera kept walking, chin up, throat tight. She had stopped crying over such things a long time ago. She turned the corner toward the livery where her old mare waited. That was when she saw him. A tall man in a trail-worn duster stood beside a roan stallion, saddlebags dusted in red clay. He was watching her, not with pity, not with disgust, just watching. His hat shadowed his face, but his eyes were sharp and clear beneath the brim. He tipped his hat. "Afternoon, miss." Vera hesitated. "Afternoon." She walked past him, heart pounding. No one spoke to her like that anymore. By the time she reached her mare, her hands were shaking. The next morning, she found him again, sitting on the split-rail fence outside the smithy, a tin mug of coffee in one hand. The roan stallion cropped grass nearby. "You live here?" he asked when she passed. "I do." He stood. "Name's Weston Fairburn." "Just passing through." She did not answer at first. She was not used to folks introducing themselves, not to her, but there was nothing in his voice but calm. "Vera Finnley." He nodded like that settled something. "Pleasure, Miss Finnley." She blinked. "You do not have to call me that. It is your name, is it not?" He was not like the others. That much was clear. Vera went home that day to the small house on the edge of town. Her parents had passed 2 winters ago. She lived alone now, worked odd jobs, kept to herself. The scar had taken more than her beauty. It had taken everything she thought she would have. But the next day, Weston was still in town, and the day after that. "Why are you still here?" she asked him finally, one late afternoon outside the post office. He shrugged. "Horse through a shoe." "Blacksmith slow?" She looked down at his boots. "That was 2 days ago." He smiled just a little. "Maybe I like the quiet here," but it was not the quiet, it was her. She could feel it in the way his eyes stayed on her face, not flinching, not avoiding. That night, the church held a community supper out on the green. Vera almost did not go, but she had made a peach pie and something in her chest tightened at the thought of Weston there, alone. She wore a simple blue dress, pinned her hair back. The scar was still there, bold in the lantern light. But she walked in steady, the room hushed just a little. Eyes shifted, whispers started, and then Weston stepped forward. He looked at her, right at her, then turned to the people watching. "She is the most beautiful woman here," he said, loud enough for the tables to hear. Silence fell like a dropped plate. Vera froze, breath caught in her chest. Then Weston offered his hand. "Will you sit with me?" Her fingers trembled as she placed her hand in his. They sat, and people stared, but he did not care. He asked her about her work, her horses, her mother's pie recipe. He listened. He laughed. He made her feel like she was whole again. After supper, they walked outside beneath the stars. "You did not have to say that," she whispered. "I meant it." She looked up at him. "You do not even know me." "I would like to." She stared at him, the wind brushing her hair across her scar. He did not look away. His hand reached up, slow and careful, and tucked the strand behind her ear. "I see you, Vera," he said. "Not the scar, you." Her throat tightened. He stepped back then, gave her space. "I will be at the smithy in the morning, if you want to talk." She nodded, unable to speak, and when she went home that night alone, she pressed her hand to her cheek, not to hide it, but to remember how it felt when his fingers brushed her skin. Something had changed, something had begun. The first frost settled over Red Hollow 2 mornings later, pale and fine across the pasture grass and the cedar shingles of the church roof. Vera wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders as she stepped out into the brittle air. Her boots crunched through the frost on the path leading toward the smithy. though she told herself she wasn't going there for any particular reason. Weston was standing just outside the forge, sleeves rolled to the elbow, hands stained dark from handling iron and soot. He was watching a boy no older than 12 struggle to lift a hammer properly under the blacksmith's eye. The boy's lip was curled in frustration, his movements clumsy. "You're using your arm too much," Weston said quietly, stepping closer. "Let your shoulder do the work." The boy tried again. The metal rang truer this time. The blacksmith gave Weston a nod. "You ever do this kind of work before?" "Some," Weston said. Mostly out of necessity, Vera waited until the boy had gone inside before speaking. "That was kind of you." Weston turned. "He's got spirit. Just needs someone to believe in him." "Not many bother with that," she said. He studied her a moment. "Seems to me folks around here are too concerned with what's plain to the eye, don't look deep enough." She shifted her weight, fingers tightening around the edge of her shawl. "They look deep enough to know what they don't want to see, their loss." They walked together down the path behind the livery, taking the long way past the creek. The cottonwoods had turned gold, their leaves trembling in the breeze. Weston walked with an easy gait, quiet but not heavy, as though he was used to long silences and didn't mind them. "I've been thinking," he said, "about that night at the supper." She glanced up at him, cautious. "What about it?" "I didn't mean to put you on display. I just figured someone ought to speak plain." She stopped walking. "You didn't embarrass me." His brow lifted slightly, waiting. "You startled me," she admitted. "No one said something kind about me in years, not like that." "Not in front of people?" Weston removed his hat, ran a hand through his hair, then looked down at the water. "I wasn't raised to keep good words to myself." She watched him a moment. "Where were you raised?" "Along the Salt Fork in Kansas. Father ran cattle. Mother taught Sunday school from our parlor. You leave family behind." He gave a small nod. "They passed. Fever went through our camp 2 winters back. I stayed with the herd a while longer, then sold off what was left. I'm sorry." He looked at her, not with sorrow, but with steadiness. "We all carry something. Some of us just don't get the choice to hide it." Vera turned toward the water, letting that settle in her chest. The breeze lifted the edge of her shawl. She felt his gaze, but he didn't press. "You plan to move on?" she asked finally. "I've been thinking about staying through the winter. Might help the smith part-time." "Why this town?" "I like the quiet, the hills, the company." She didn't answer right away. He added, quieter now, "I've seen enough places to know when a thing feels right." They stood there a few breaths longer, the creek whispering beside them, the yellow leaves drifting past like slow thoughts. When she looked at him again, she didn't flinch. "I wouldn't mind if you stayed." His face softened, like something long tensed had let go. "I was hoping you'd say that." By late October, the last of the sunflowers had bowed their heads, and the wind came down colder off the high ridges. Vera hung quilts across the windows at night and lit the stove with cedar kindling. Weston stayed on, true to his word, taking up work in the forge and sleeping in the cot behind the smithy. Folks in town started mentioning his name without suspicion, though they still glanced sideways when he walked beside Vera. That morning, she found him outside the church fence, hammering a loose board back into place. He wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his sleeve when she approached, then leaned on the hammer handle. "You always fix things that aren't yours?" she asked. "Only when they're about to fall over." She stepped closer, arms crossed under her shawl. "You've been busy." "I heard you helped Widow Talbot carry in her firewood," she asked, he said. "I don't turn down a request that comes with warm biscuits." Vera lifted an eyebrow. "She baked for you, 3 kinds. I think she's trying to marry me off to her niece in Laramie." A flicker of something twisted in Vera's belly, but she kept her tone even. "You planning to go?" He met her eyes without flinching. "No." They stood a moment in the shadow of the church steeple, the silence easy now, not uncertain. "I was thinking," he said, "it's getting colder. You've got room in that barn of yours." "For what?" "For a wagon. Mine's pulling to the left, axles bowed. I can fix it, but I'd need cover." "You asking for shelter or trying to trade your way into company?" He smiled, slow and open. "Maybe both." She tilted her head. "I'll think on it." He tapped the fence post twice and stepped back. "I'll be around." That evening, Vera swept the hearth clean and lit a lantern. The barn had stood unused since her father's hands failed him. She opened the big door and walked the length of it, brushing cobwebs from the rafters and checking the beams. When she returned inside, she pulled down a second cup from the shelf without thinking. The next morning, Weston brought the wagon. Its wheel wobbled as he turned it into the yard, and the mule gave a tired snort as it came to a halt. Vera held the door open without a word, and he guided the rig inside with practiced ease. He worked through the afternoon, sleeves pushed up again, sawdust clinging to his trousers. Vera watched from the porch, shelling beans into a tin basin. He didn't speak much while he worked, only humming something low under his breath that she didn't recognize. When the sun dipped behind the ridgeline, she called out, "You eat supper yet?" He wiped his hands on a rag. Not yet. Inside, they sat at the table her mother had once polished with beeswax. She'd made cornbread and stew, and the smell filled the room, simple and warm. Weston didn't speak until he'd eaten 3 spoonfuls. Then he set his bowl down gently and looked across the table. "You always cook like this," she shrugged. "It's just food." "No, it's something else. Feels like someone cared what it tasted like." Vera folded her napkin on her lap. "I suppose I don't see the point in doing things halfway." He nodded, then leaned back. "I found something in your barn." Her posture stiffened. "What?" "An old bridle, hand-tooled, unused. My father made it, never sold it. He was good. He was better at leather than people." Weston let that hang in the air a moment, then said, "I had a sister, Eliza." "She'd have liked you." Vera blinked. "Why?" "She never liked foolish people, said they wasted time. You don't waste anything." She didn't know what to say to that. After he left, she stood at the window and watched him cross the yard to the barn. He paused in the doorway, turned, and looked back. Then he nodded once and disappeared into the dark. That night, Vera sat at the edge of her bed, hands in her lap. She could still feel the heat of his gaze, not pressing, not asking, just there. For the first time in years, she didn't hear the wind through the shutters as something lonely. It sounded different now, like something waiting. The first snow came early that year, thin, dry flurries that blew sideways across the hills and settled in the hollows between fence posts. Vera woke to the sound of it brushing against the windows, soft as breath. She dressed in quiet, careful movements, her mind already on the barn. The wagon was under canvas, but Weston would be out there anyway, likely already mending something. She found him at the workbench, sleeves down this time, a wool coat buttoned to the throat, a small oil lamp flickering beside him. He didn't turn when she entered, just said, "Morning." She stepped in, pulling the door shut behind her. "You always start this early. There's peace in it," he said. "Before the world starts talking." She glanced at his hands, calloused, steady working a brass buckle into place on a leather strap. "You making tack?" He nodded. "Custom order." Sheriff's mare rubbed a sore under her old bridle. "Asked if I could rig something softer. You know horses well. Well enough to listen when they don't want something." She leaned against the stall rail. "How long do you reckon you'll stay in Red Hollow?" He set the strap down, finally looking at her. "That depend on you." She didn't answer right away. Her hand found the edge of the rail, fingers curling over the worn wood. "I've been asked to help at the school," she said. "Miss Lowell's niece caught influenza. She needs someone to mind the children until Christmas." His brow lifted slightly. "You say yes." "I haven't said anything yet." "Why not?" She hesitated. "I don't know what I'd say to a room full of children. They're not looking for speeches, just someone who sees them." A long breath escaped her, and when she looked up, his gaze hadn't shifted. "You think I could do it?" she asked. "I think you already have," he said. "You just haven't noticed." The wind outside picked up, rattling the barn's siding. She stepped closer to the bench, drawn by something slow and sure rising between them. "What about you?" she asked. "What would you do if you stayed?" "Don't need much. A roof, a reason to come home at night." Her voice quieted. "You'd want a place of your own." "I'd want a life that didn't feel like passing through all the time." She looked at the saddle blanket folded near his tools. "That kind of life's hard to come by." "Hard things are worth it," he said, "if they're real." Vera reached out, fingertips grazing the edge of the leather strap he'd been working. "You ever built something that lasted?" He stepped around the bench, slow and measured, until they stood face to face. Not yet. She could feel the warmth of him, the steadiness. He didn't reach for her, didn't move closer. He waited. Vera lifted her chin, eyes steady on his. I don't know how to let someone stay. You don't have to know, he said. You just have to want to. She didn't speak, but she didn't look away either. And after a long moment, she let her hand rest lightly against his coat sleeve. That night, as snow thickened across the roof, Weston came to the house for supper again. She handed him a bowl without speaking, and he took it with a quiet nod. They ate at the table, the lamp casting amber light across the walls. When he finished, he stood and began washing the dishes without being asked. She leaned against the doorway, watching the slow, easy way he moved, how his presence filled the room without pressing on it. I said yes to the school, she said. He didn't turn, just rinsed the last bowl and set it in the rack. I'm glad. You were right, she added. They don't need speeches, just someone to look them in the eye. He dried his hands on a dishcloth, then faced her. Same as anyone. She stepped forward, then paused. I'm not used to this. Neither am I, he said, but I want to be. His eyes softened, and in the quiet between them, something settled. Not rushed, not fragile. He reached out, not to pull her close, but to offer his hand. She took it. The snow deepened day by day, layering the hills in quiet folds of white and softening every sound in red hollow. Vera walked to the schoolhouse each morning with her shawl wrapped tight and her breath in clouds, the hem of her coat dusted with frost. The children greeted her with cautious curiosity, but by the second week, they lingered after lessons to ask questions and draw chalk pictures on the slate board. She found herself smiling at their chatter, the way they argued over arithmetic or whispered secrets into mittened hands. Their presence filled a space in her she hadn't realized had gone hollow. She returned home one afternoon to find Weston cutting wood behind the barn, sleeves rolled despite the cold, the rhythm of the axe purposeful. A neat stack had already been set by the porch. She stepped into the yard, boot leather crunching beneath her. You keep working like this, I'll have to start paying you. He set the axe aside and brushed the sawdust from his hands. You already are, she raised an eyebrow. How do you figure? There's hot stew waiting most nights and a roof over my head. That's more than I've had in a long while. She folded her arms, the wind tugging at the edge of her scarf. You've been on your own a long time, haven't you? Since I was 20. After my parents passed, I took to working ranches, hauling freight, stayed nowhere longer than I had to. What changed? He looked at her then, steady and sure. You did. She didn't answer, not at first. Instead, she walked closer, her voice low. I'm still learning how to let someone stay. Some days I don't know what I'm doing. You don't have to know everything, he said. You just have to want the life that comes with the choice. She glanced down at the ring of frost around her boots. I do. That night they sat by the fire inside her house. Weston brought in a battered tin box from the barn and set it on the floor beside the hearth. When she looked at him, curious, he opened it slowly. Inside were letters, carefully folded, and a small sketchbook worn at the edges. These were Eliza's, my sister. His voice was quiet but even. Vera reached for the top letter, paused. You sure? He nodded once. She unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was neat and slanted, full of warmth. Lines about prairie flowers, about the sound of coyotes beyond the fence at night, about how she hoped Weston had found someone who made him feel settled. She'd have liked you, he said again, but this time there was no distance in it. She'd have said you were too good for someone like me. I'm not better than you, she said. He looked at her, and in the firelight there was nothing guarded in his gaze. You're honest. You've suffered and kept on. That's rare. She closed the letter and handed it back, careful not to bend the edges. You've kept her close. It's the only way I knew how. They sat without speaking for a while, the fire crackling low. Then Vera stood and walked to the cupboard. She returned with a small tin of loose tea, one of the last jars her mother had kept from back east. I've been saving this, she said, for something good. He watched her pour into the kettle, the scent of mint and dried apple filling the room. When they drank, their hands brushed. Neither pulled away. By the time the thaw came in March, the town had changed its tune. No more whispers when Vera passed. Children waved from porches. Old Widow Talbot stopped by with quilting scraps and left them on the rail, saying nothing but nodding once toward the barn where Weston still kept his tools. One Sunday, the preacher stepped down from the pulpit and found Vera just outside the church doors. "I hear you've taken up teaching," he said. For now, he hesitated. "You've done good by those children. They speak well of you." She met his eyes, calm. "They deserve someone to listen," he nodded slowly. "If you need the church for anything weddings, say you've only to ask." Vera didn't answer right away. She waited until Weston joined her, his hand brushing hers as they fell into step together. That afternoon, she took him to the far edge of her land, where the hills met the cottonwood stand. A small cabin, long abandoned, leaned into the slope. "My father started this for my brother before he passed," she said. "Never finished it." Weston stepped inside, tested the beams. "Solid frame. I thought if you wanted a place of your own, close by." He turned toward her, eyes softer than she'd ever seen. "Only if it's ours." She felt something steady rise in her chest. "Yours and mine, then." They spent the spring finishing the cabin, beam by beam, with windows that faced the sunrise and a porch wide enough for quiet evenings. The town watched without comment now. They'd seen what had grown between them, slow, sure, rooted like the cottonwoods. On the first warm day of June, they stood beneath those trees, with a handful of neighbors gathered near and the preacher waiting with a small book in hand. Vera wore her mother's brooch pinned to her collar. Weston's coat had been brushed and mended, his hands still rough but steady as he held hers. "I never thought I'd have a place that felt like home," he said. "You were just waiting for the right place to land," she answered. When the vows were spoken, they didn't kiss with ceremony. They just leaned into one another, forehead to forehead, as if they'd already been doing it for years. That evening, they sat on the porch of the finished cabin. The sky turned gold above the hills. A hawk wheeled in the distance. Vera leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. He spoke without moving. "What do you see for us?" She watched the light deepen. "A quiet life, a good one, days where nothing needs fixing, nights where we don't say much because we don't have to." He laced his fingers with hers. "That sounds just right." The cabin behind them held warmth. The land before them held promise. And between them, what had begun in silence, in small offerings and steady hands, had become something whole. They never left Red Hollow. They didn't need to.